When I realized what was really going on, I was seized with wild horror. Imagine that you see a human body on the operating table, and then suddenly realize that it is you. In addition, you can hear one of the doctors shaking his head and saying, "That's it, the patient has passed away. Write down the time of death." The doctors did not realize that I had heard everything, and although my heart stopped, my consciousness continued to what I have discovered beyond our mortal existence will not leave anyone indifferent. And it doesn't matter if you are an atheist or a believer in the afterlife. Everything is not as you are told. Believe me, I know what I'm talking about because I have not only been beyond the horizon of life, but also returned from there. Georgi Rodonia talked about his incredible experience of clinical death, which is considered one of the longest in the world, since he returned to life while already in the morgue. This story really makes your blood run cold. But on the other hand, it provides answers to many questions that torment any reasonable person, and they are all related to the topic. Is there life after death? And if there is, what is it like? It all started long before that, when Georgi Rodonia, a Soviet neuropathologist and atheist to the core, was run over by a car in 1976. He was taken to the intensive care unit in extremely serious condition. Alas, the doctors failed to save him, but when the experts delivered their sad verdict, death for Georgi Rodonia himself was not the end of existence, but only the beginning of a journey into the otherworldly space. Here's what he said about it himself. "I saw what was happening as if from the outside. There was only one thought in my head. How can I be when I'm not there? We atheists are used to thinking that everything ends with cardiac arrest, but reality clearly showed me that this was not the case. Fanatical atheism turned out to be nothing more than a lie. The facts spoke for themselves. In an instant I realized the full horror of my situation, and it seemed even more terrible to me when, simultaneously with this thought, I saw my grieving family. My death has already been reported. I saw my 2 sons and, although they were still young to understand what had happened, they felt the tragedy that had happened in their family. But then, even more shocking events happened to Georgi Rodonia. His soul seemed to be caught up by an invisible wind, and he found himself in the room of his neighbor, with whom they were friends. A few days before his death, a neighbor had a baby and now he was crying a lot. His parents did not know what to do with him. No matter how they calmed him down, the crying did not stop for a minute. And then Georgi Rodonia realized that he could talk to him. That's how he described the case. It was amazing. I couldn't talk to his parents, my friends, but I could talk to a little boy who had recently been born. I asked him what happened. Of course, no words were said, but I got the answer to my question. I think it happened telepathically. I found out that the boy was in pain, but unfortunately, in my ghostly state, I couldn't tell his dad and mom about it. Then, by an effort of will, Georgi Rodonia mentally returned himself to the operating room, where his lifeless body was still lying. He hoped to somehow let the doctors know that he was still conscious. But that was not the case. The most terrible period of his otherworldly journey began. Everything went dark around him abruptly, and it seemed to him that he had fallen into a dream. But it wasn't like that, he wasn't sleeping. Meanwhile, the darkness around his mind was getting thicker and denser. Georgi Rodonia recalled, "Although I found myself in total darkness and still could not feel my body, I did not feel any physical pain. Nevertheless, I still understood that it was me and that there was absolute darkness around me. This darkness surrounded me from all sides. It seemed to me that she was pressing on me. I wasn't ready for this, although I still know where I was. It seemed unfathomable." Gradually, he pulled himself together and began to think about what was really going on. But nothing pleasant or soothing came to mind. He kept asking himself questions. He was in the dark. What should he do? Then he remembered Descartes' famous saying, "I think therefore I exist," and it helped to relieve a lot of tension. He realized that he was still alive, although he was obviously in a completely different dimension. Then he thought, if I exist, why not think positively? I am George, I am in darkness, but I know for sure that I continue to exist, which means that we should not despair. Reflecting on his new position, George Rodonia thought about what can be opposed to darkness. It seemed to him that he had forgotten everything he knew about on Earth, and that's how the idea came to him that, in addition to darkness, there is still light. Thinking about the light, he noticed that the darkness around him was beginning to gradually dissipate. Soon, blinding white light shone everywhere around him, which was so bright that George Rodonia compared it to the continuous flash of a camera. George Rodonia recalled that at first it was painful to look at this light, or rather, to perceive it with consciousness, because he no longer possessed physical vision. Soon he got used to the dazzling light and felt a soothing warmth and comfort emanating from it. After getting used to the light, George began to look around, and only now did he notice that the entire space around him consists of tiny particles which we call molecules and atoms. At first it seemed to him that there was no order in the movement of these particles. But then he saw that this chaos was beautiful in its symmetry. George was shocked by such incredible beauty. He said that at that moment, the all-encompassing form of all living things appeared before his eyes. Admiring this beauty, he felt that his anxiety about his position had disappeared. He stopped worrying about both his body and the continued existence of his soul. All restrictions on the perception of life after death have disappeared. At a certain moment, another glow appeared, a kind of golden disk resembling the sun. This light penetrated George's consciousness, and he felt like a part of this light. He began to experience waves of indescribable ecstasy one after another. The fear and uncertainty have completely disappeared. Now it seemed to him that everything that had happened was natural. He felt the logic and deep correctness of what was happening. The presence of an otherworldly space gave life meaning. Everything fell into place. Endless evolution and spiritual development really exist, and now George understood why they were needed. He realized that there was no time in the afterlife. His whole life appeared before him in its entirety, from beginning to end. He felt like both a spectator and a participant in this life. He compared this vision to a hologram, which contained everything from the moment of birth to the sad ending on the operating table in the intensive care unit. George realized that life exists everywhere, and it is endless. Only the forms and its manifestations change, but the essence of existence never ends. All existence is interconnected and one. It would seem that this was the end of the otherworldly adventure of George Rodwan. But the most amazing and incomprehensible thing happened only in his posthumous fate. The turn came again, and this time it was so shocking that, according to George himself, he could not remember it for a long time without shuddering. The fact is that while his soul was in other spheres, his body had already been brought to the pathologist for an autopsy. After all, the doctors witnessed his death. A specialist at the morgue made a longitudinal incision on the corpse to open the chest, and at that moment George opened his eyes. At first, the doctor did not attach much importance to this, believing that it was just a reflex, and closed his eyes. But Georgie opened them again, and then, frozen with horror, the medic held a lamp to his face and noticed with amazement that the pupils reacted to light. The doctor immediately began to do a heart massage and urgently took George to the operating room. Everyone understood that this could not have happened, because too much time had passed since death. And yet, the one who was already considered a corpse suddenly showed signs of life. When the doctors in the intensive care unit brought Georgie Rodney back to life, his soul felt like some invisible force grabbed it and roughly pushed it down into the abyss of darkness and terrible pain. And after a while, he woke up in his body. Such a resurrection from the dead can only be called a miracle. Returning to life, George told his wife and close friends what he had been through while he was dead. Of course, few people believed him, but when the diagnosis of the neighbor's child was confirmed, others became less skeptical of George's stories. After 9 months of recovery in the hospital, he did not return to medical practice, but became a priest. He spoke about his incredible experience and spiritual transformation as follows. I managed to fully recover, but I realized that now my life would not be the same. All I wanted to do now was to learn wisdom. I realized that the only purpose of our life is love. You need to love nature, love people, love creation itself. But this is not enough for many. Knowing that I had experienced clinical death, people came to me for answers and asked what awaits them after death. And I answered each of them that the afterlife for everyone would be an extension of his soul. Scoundrels and villains will find themselves only in the darkest areas of the otherworldly space, and bright and kind souls will continue their endless existence in the higher spheres of existence. Clinical death of Georgi Rodinai lasted 2 days, which is one of the longest in the world. This is not a fantasy, but a real fact carefully documented. Therefore, a reasonable person will not be able to dismiss it so easily. Write in the comments what you think about this. Dear friends, thank you for watching my video to the end. If you liked it, please like it and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It's very important. Thank you and have a nice day.